this warm welcome. I feel very good on this campus. And then we started with my talk on the emergence of a Muslim community in Germany. The process of institutionalization of Islam in Western European countries is bound to the question of legitimization. Academic studies have rightly so asked who can speak for Islam. However, with the example of the German case, I will show that the institutionalization is also connected to the formation of a Muslim consciousness, turning around the question who can speak for Muslims. In the following, I will argue that the public debate on the presence and visibility of Muslims in Europe sets the stage for an ongoing communalization led by the idea that a political representation of Muslim is needed, which overcomes the differences of regional origin in the many diverse local communities. While in many cases on the local level, differences in cultural heritage and origin were emphasized in the communication between immigrants from Turkey, former Yugoslavia, and Arab countries, finally the category religion superseded other categories of belonging. Currently, a considerable amount of individuals and organizations is claiming to represent Muslims in the public sphere, showing that the emerging Muslim community consists of many different and competing voices. While the German public imagines one cohesive Muslim community, it still consists of a large variety of different and competing voices. A feeling of belonging, that is my main argument, between Muslims of different national, linguistic, and political backgrounds is only slowly but emerging. Markers of this development can be observed after notable discursive events in nationwide media that lead to Muslim individuals taking a stance as Muslims. But at the same time, academics, those interested in the research of religious practice, as well as those interested in immigration patterns and integration success, started to frame descendants of Turkish guest workers, Kurdish, Bosnian, and Palestinian refugees as Muslims. This paper will take a look at how prominent individuals with a Muslim background and Islamic communalists are drawing on their Muslim identity, raising the urgent question, who can speak for Muslims and who will be accepted, for instance, by the government and by the media to speak for Muslims. One of the major incidents in the formation and institutionalization of Islamic organizations in Germany happened in 2007. 4 German Islamic umbrella organizations joined in order to represent Islamic associations towards officials and government representatives. The founding was accompanied both by the claim of the Islamic organizations for equal treatment compared to established religious communities, like churches and the Jewish community, and a request from the governmental side for a unified Muslim representational body. In this way, the institutionalization of Islam in Germany is heavily shaped by the public debate on Muslims in Germany and the engagement of government officials. The German Islam Conference, a long-term negotiation process in which the Federal Interior Ministry in 2006 invited Muslim representatives for the first time. So that was actually the first time that German government officials talked officially or formally to Muslim organizations. They did talk to Turkish and other organizations that were organized along ethnic lines, but not to Islamic organizations or to Muslims who came to speak as Muslims. So here in 2006, the Interior Ministry invited Muslim representatives for the first time. However, this has fueled the debate on the question of legitimate representatives for Muslims even more, because they were inviting not only the representatives of Islamic organizations, but also Muslim individuals, besides the functionaries of Islamic associations, without leading to acknowledgement of Islam as a religious community according to the German law. The foundation of the Coordination Council, this merger of these four main Islamic organizations, was not really accepted as a spokesbody until now, and it most probably won't be. So I will be, rather than looking at the institutionalization, which is very interesting, and a lot of people do that, and I think it's also very relevant, I will do something that I don't think anybody does, looking at secular persons who have a coming out or out themselves as Muslims. So they take a stance as Muslims in the public. And before I do that, I want to ask some questions about when and why did we actually talk about Muslims, about the category of Muslims in the European context. Of course, there was 9/11 in 2001, and a lot of people would argue that this has been the tipping point, that this has been the main event that turned people into Muslims. And a lot of Muslims would also look back and say that was a very important event. However, I was looking back at and reread over the weekend an article by Aristide Solberg and Long Live Wu. And they were arguing in this article that appeared in 1999, why is Islam like Spanish? Culture and cooperation in Europe and the United States. They were arguing that a development that led to Hispanics being categorized in one group, people who speak Spanish, along the lines of language, being categorized as one community, and in the sense of a political community rather than a real social reality. The same happened in Europe, especially in the Western countries of Europe, with Muslims, and that was 1999. And I really can recommend this article. I mean, I just reread it, and I thought, like, wow, they actually had the main points that we are still talking about in this very article. A lot of the issues that are described there are still relevant today. For instance, the issue of legitimation, of spokesbodies, and so on. So either he's a prophet, they're prophets, or that was actually going on before. I found more people that were talking about similar things before, or that would say this did not only start with 2001. And one of the people that would be saying that is Tariq Mudud, when he's looking at the developments in the UK. So Tariq Mudud is describing actually the dilemma of affirmative action. So he's describing the debates about racial discrimination, about religious discrimination, and the forces against that in the UK socio-political sphere. And he's pointing at something, and that is related to the categorization issue. To verify the existence of such discrimination, people have to be self-classified and counted. This practice has inevitably led to arguments about which group labels are authentic. So he's talking about that in the UK, in the British anti-discrimination law, you had no possibility to claim rights on the basis of religious discrimination, or discrimination because of religious headscarf and so on. but because of ethnic or racial discrimination. So that means that the turban of a Sikh was an issue that you could bring forward, but not the headscarf. So these were, or if you would argue the headscarf is needed, and you don't and you wanted to claim a discrimination because of the headscarf, you would not be able to do that because it's a religious symbol or a religious practice, but because it's an ethnic issue. So what that led to was, for instance, that South Asians could claim issues, but Arabs not so much. And if you were of British descent and wanted to wear a headscarf, you had no point in making a claim. So this led actually and this debate was taking place in the 90s in the UK, as Tariq Modood and others are describing that. And it led to an Islamization in the sense of that the category Muslim was brought forward in this debate. Tariq Modood describes the trend from South Asian identifying and mobilizing around the term black, which was replaced then by the term Muslim in the early 1990s, actually after the Rushdie affair that took place in 1989. But he says there is a distinction between a group's mode of oppression and a mode of being. And he reminds us that both terms, black and Muslim, have been reactive terms and are shaped by the situation that the minorities do not control. And neither the oppressor nor the oppressed are totally free to set the terms of a reactive identity. And I quote him again, in a very short space of time, Muslim, in quotation marks, has become a key political minority identity acknowledged by right-wing and left-wing bigots and the open-minded media and government. End of quote of Tariq Modood. And I want to add, and by academia. So how does that look in Germany? Oh no, I have another one. Stefano Allievi. Stefano Allievi, an Italian researcher, is arguing that the connection between the conflictual interpretation of Islamic presence in Europe and the Huntingtonian interpretation of the clash of civilization was also a driving mode. And this again, pre-9/11, 2001, Huntington, does anybody know? When that appeared, 93 and 94, the book. So that was actually a mode that was introduced in the 90s. So Stefano Allievi is arguing that, that this framing as Muslims is connected to the idea of the clash of civilization. And actually Huntington was not the first one or the only one that was arguing in these modes. He just had the guts to get it out and took the and put it into a language that then really became a buzzword. So to Germany, that's really down there. When I look at the German debates, it seems to coincide with 9/11, this development. But actually, if we look at it closely, then it started earlier. The first official estimate about Muslims in Germany appeared in 2000. The question was asked in 1999 by an opposition party. They actually asked in 1999, so how many Muslims do live in Germany? Before that, we were talking in Germany about ethnic origin, about guest workers, refugees. This was the terminology. So what had happened? In 1999, we were in the middle of a debate on the changes, on a major change in citizenship law. That means that people were arguing that the foreigners and their children and the children of their children that were living in Germany and that came to Germany in the late 1960s and 70s they should have the possibility to become German citizens and to participate in democracy, for instance. And so we had in Germany a really large number of people that were what people call denizens, so that had not the full rights of citizens. And here was the argument: we need to integrate them, we need to get them into the system, also in terms of citizenship. And that would mean to end a long lie of politics, that Germany was not an immigration country, that these people, it would mean to accept that these people would not go back, because there is no back. A lot of them were born in Germany, and I will show you a chart on that later. So the change in citizenship law from jus sanguinis to jus solis, from the right of blood to the right of birth. That means that you could be born in Germany and thereby you would have the right to German citizenship. That was introduced in 1999 and started to be enacted at the 1st January in 2000. So exactly at that point in time, we have the question in the parliament: how many Muslims do we have? Can you read that? That's the answer. So that's one of the pages from the answer of the German government, and I think, yes, that is the second one. So a similar question was then asked in 2006, and this are the results from 2007. And here you can see, if it works, if you can really read that. So that is the biggest number. Let me say one thing first. So how did the government count Muslims? They looked at the migration statistics, which actually is not about religion. Why did they do that? Because only Christians, only Protestants and Catholics in Germany are asked about their religion. So no Jew will be asked, no Muslim will be asked by official, from official side. So the government said, and the officials said, we have to go to the migration statistics and look at how many people from Turkey live in Germany, and by that equalize that with being Muslim. So actually we're talking about the most of the numbers we get throughout Western Europe about Muslims are actually telling us not the real faith, the actual religious practice or anything like that, but they tell us about the migrational background. So to put this clear, actually, the numbers that we get from this particular answer by the German government, for instance, will tell us not how many Muslims we have in Germany, but how many people with a background in a Muslim majority country are living in Germany. And this is important. Why? Because a lot of people that come out of these countries are actually not Muslim. They are not even of Muslim background. They might be Yazidis, they might be Christians, they might be Baha'i, and so on. And a lot of them might also, even though coming from a Muslim family, not see themselves as Muslims and not believe and not practice. Actually, interestingly, last year the German government then made a representative survey among 17,000 Muslims. They were asking 6,000 about their families, and thereby they got this large number. And I give you one example from Iran. 40% of the people that were questioned about their religion that came originally from Iran, or their parents, or the parents of their parents, said they had no religion at all. Among the 60 that had or said they have a religion, some were Muslim, less than half. less than 50% said they were Muslim. The other were Christian, Baha'i, and other religious groups. Among the Muslims, around 30% said they would call themselves Muslims, but they don't really practice. They might not even believe. So that is telling you a little bit, and I'm breaking this down. I'm giving you numbers. That's a little mean. I'm giving you numbers, and then I tell you, but they're not real, right? And it's true. We are actually, I'm always adding academics, because a lot of people are saying, yeah, the media are doing that, and the politicians are doing that, but actually a lot of academics are constructing Muslims as well. And we need to do that because we need funding, and it's just spicy these days, and you get funding if you write on top of everything Muslim, whatever's in there. Doesn't really matter. The best is actually if there's in there integration and immigration. I mean, these are the terms that are right now the buzzwords in Germany. If you could tell us about, do Muslims really integrate? And I'm saying that because I'm just struggling these days on an article on the connection between the construction of Muslims and immigrants. And I hope, oh my God, I want to jump there. And so these are the bigger terms these days. And immigrants is then differentiated or defined as people with a migrational background. So we have immigrants that actually migrated themselves, and people that have a migrational background because of their parents or their grandparents. Or their grand-grandparents can happen as well, and I tell you how. So I hope you can see that. So there is a microcensus, and since 2009, this microcensus, which is an official representative statistical survey that is raised every year among 1% of Germany's population in a random sample. That is one of the biggest random surveys that we have in Europe. So imagine every year 1% of the population, 82 million people is the population, so 1% of that are questioned every year with a very long questionnaire, about an hour, about everything. And since 2005, this survey has questions about migration and integration as well. So here we get a sense of how many people do we talk about in the hot debates that we're having in the media. And the categories here are foreigners. So that's, can I see that thing? So this is on that side. Foreigners with migration experience. That means it's a foreigner, has a foreign passport, no German passport, and actually moved over a border, right, into Germany. Then we have foreigners without migration experience. These are people who were born inside the country with two foreigners with migration experience, these families, or they are the grandchildren of them, and did not naturalize, or did not get a naturalization, did not get the German passport. Then we have Germans with own migration and experience. It's up there. The biggest chunk, or actually quite similar to the foreigners. These are Germans who either got a naturalization, they got the German passport by applying for it, or they were born in Russia, for instance. We have the Russian Germans who could get the German citizenship and were not called foreigners, and that's why they did not appear in the other lists, in the migration statistics, because they were of German descent. And thereby, and that was a funny thing for a long while in the German history, that people that were born in Germany did not have a German citizenship, but people who were born outside Germany could have them because they were of German descent. And then you would have the last group, Germans without own migration experience, but with a migration background. These are descendants of naturalized parents and grandparents. And actually, the migrational background counts from the point on where your parents get naturalization. So then it counts 3 generations. So if people were born to foreigners, to foreign parents, and they will get the naturalization, their grandparents will still have an immigrant background, even though they might live in Germany since the 6th generation. And then we have the biggest group, 81% Germans without migrational background. So we are talking all the time, when we're talking about immigrants in the German context, we're talking about 15% of the population. I just wanted to give you a sense of that. And I also wanted to give you a sense of the weird terminology that is developing in the country. Oftentimes, people would refer to the 15% calling them foreigners anyway, because they look different. So that is the debate that we're currently having, and I'm giving you not more of that because it's sometimes pretty frustrating. Interestingly, Muslims are found in all of these sections. Of course, there are Muslims in Germany without migrational background and with German heritage. But in most of the surveys, they will be ignored. And also in most of the political negotiations, they would be ignored. They seem to irritate the image and the concept of the Muslim. Because until now, Muslim is something foreign. And here, there might be some parallels with the debates on Hispanics in the US. So getting back, I wanted to get back to the categorization, self-identification issue. And I will soon give you some experiences and some quotes from people from my field work. But let's reflect another time. Richard Jenkins was talking about categorization and self-identification, and how it is important to actually differentiate between the two. He was actually talking about ethnicity in his article, and argued that categorization often leads to self-identification. Both are processes that go hand in hand and inform each other. But we should not take categorization as equaling self-identification. And categories don't necessarily mean that there's a real face-to-face community behind that. But sometimes, and I would argue in this case, categorization leads to a real community, a face-to-face community, and an identification evolving. Stefano Allievi and Martin Brunessen, Jette Clausen, and some others have argued that immigrants in Western Europe have become Muslims. Even though not all immigrants are Muslim, not even the majority in Germany are Muslims or of Muslim descent. And even though, what did I say? Not all immigrants are Muslims, and not all Muslims are immigrants. I mean, I said there are Muslims of German descent, definitely. Even in the 3rd, 4th generation right now. So immigrants have become Muslims, not in the sense that they really became Muslim and went to the mosque. I mean, that happened in some cases, definitely. But they became Muslims in the debates about them. there was a fundamental change of terminology in media, political, and academic discourses. And we now think, and I think that is even true for the US, that yes, naturally, they are Muslims. That is the only way to talk about them, right? They are Muslims. I was in a conversation last week in Washington, and somebody asked me, but what would you call them then? Right? So we think actually it's kind of natural, and I want to question that naturality. It's not natural, it's made. We actually made them Muslim. And that does not mean that they weren't, that among the people that we're talking about here are not true believers. That's not what I mean. But it's the categorization, the way we frame them in the political, in the media, and in the academic debate. And I just want to question at some points, are we really talking about Muslims at one place, or are we talking about immigration? Are we talking about issues like that? Because right now, what happens is, for instance, we have a nice academic work about how integration can be successful, and on the cover, naturally, we find a Muslim girl with a headscarf. Naturally, because she seems to be the subject that needs integration. Whether she is of German descent and fully integrated doesn't really matter. But the symbols, the framing is actually done, and at some points we don't even need to say things about integration or immigration. But because we're talking about Muslims, it's already thought that way. Okay. Before I'm running out of time, I have some examples. One example is Cem Özdemir, and here I want to tell you how this evolved in the German debate. Cem Özdemir became a member. He was elected to the German Bundestag, the parliament, the federal parliament, in 1994. This is an article from the major weekly magazine, The Spiegel, and it titled, "The Green Cem Özdemir is the first Turkish-born member of the Bundestag. He doesn't want to remain the only one." He didn't. I found it interesting to look at this first example. How was he described? How was he categorized? I can tell you Muslim and Islam does not appear in the whole article, and in a lot of other articles about it. Politically, Özdemir was driven by typically green worries. He organized demonstrations for peace and anti-nuclear initiatives. The Turks only became an issue for him after his election into the regional executive board of the Green Party, because journalists were confronting him only with this issue. So Cem Özdemir in 1994 became a foreigner, or an immigrant person, a person who is immigrant, and that's why he has to be engaged in immigration issues, right? What happens later? I'm jumping a little bit. I'm jumping to 2005. So here, for Cem Özdemir, the key event to become a Muslim is not 9/11, 2001, it's 7/7, 2005, attacks in London. Here you can see him next to the Marie-Louise Beck from his own party, the then Commissioner for Integration and Migration. And they are sitting in the British Embassy in Berlin. Down there you can see them with a rabbi, with Nadim Elias, the representative of the Central Council of Muslims in Germany, and here is a priest. So it was an ecumenical prayer, and they took a stance against the terror attacks. At that meeting, or at that press conference, Cem Özdemir in 2005, so a little more than 10 years after he was elected into the Bundestag, he said, "My parents taught me Islam as a religion of peace." He felt it is necessary to speak out about his connection to Islam and about his understanding. I approached him later on and asked him about this development. So what had happened? And he told me, the majority society sees me as part of this community. For a start, this does not have to be something bad. I have always tried to merge with the majority society. I wanted to be invisible in the majority society, to be one of the majority society. But then 9/11 happened and everything that followed. What is everything that followed? Everything that followed is anti-terrorism laws, it's categorization in the public, it's being asked a lot about being Muslim and all that. And he's then arguing that he always was in a position where he could speak up to decision makers, and he had the ears of decision makers. So unlike a lot of other people and also a lot of other Muslims, so he saw it as a responsibility to make use of this position and to be a bridge between his Turkish community but also the Muslim community as they became relevant in these debates. I want to look at another case, and this is a person that was appointed minister this year. So Cem Özdemir, you could say Cem Özdemir was the first Turkish-born parliamentarian. She is the first Turkish-born minister. Is that a right term? Yeah. So that is in one of the German countries. Germany has a federal system, so this is in Lower Saxony. And she got a much bigger media relevance kind of and coverage. And here we see her taking the oath. And it was a huge debate about which God would she refer to. She said it's the same. This even stirred more debates. But my main point is, it says, so it's the first Muslim minister that is appointed in the country, throughout Germany. And actually, and that's really interesting, I have to make that point as well. Philipp Rösler, he's now a Minister for Health on the federal level. And when he was appointed, he was born in Vietnam and adopted and was raised in Germany. But when he became a minister, he just became a minister. No reference to whatever. I mean, there were some references then in the articles about why he looks a little different than the other ministers, but so I know that he is adopted. I mean, stuff like that. That was in there. No reference to his religion. You can find that on Wikipedia, but it's not an issue. It's definitely not in the headline. And we could have other similar examples for that. I think I have another one. Yeah, that was another example. In 2008, again, Nebahat Güçlü in Hamburg, in another country, she was the first person of Turkish origin in becoming a president of the parliament. In the headline, it's first Muslim. So this is how people are categorized, how people are labeled. And as we saw in the case of Cem Özdemir, they really take it on as a responsibility. They say, because I'm seen as a Muslim, I have to kind of respond to that. I have another example from somebody who doesn't say he's Muslim, but he refers to his Muslim parents. So he's not himself Muslim. He doesn't even speak about his religion or non-religion. This is Fatih Akin, a very well-known director of several films. One was Soul Kitchen that came out last year. And last year there was this debate about the minaret ban in Switzerland. So some some 2 weeks after the referendum on the minaret ban, Fatih Akin should have had his premiere. Do you say that in English? For the film Soul Kitchen, and he wrote an open letter to the Swiss people, and I think that is interesting. He refers to his parents as a child of Muslim parents who do not see minarets as a symbol of political Islam, but rather simply the complete architecture of their houses of worship. I feel personally affected by the referendum. That is why I refuse to travel to Switzerland, he wrote. This referendum conflicts with my understanding of humanism, tolerance, and the belief that harmonious coexistence of peoples of different backgrounds, races, and religions must be possible. So this is an example where a media event or a real event is leading somebody to speaking out as a Muslim, or here as a child of Muslim parents. A similar case is Canan Topçu. I just want to show you that there's really a variety of people. I'm not only talking about one or two. And that is Canan Topçu, journalist. She came out after she was present at a mosque building conflict. And she said she just felt in that meeting, she went in that meeting as a non-Muslim or somebody with some Muslim background, and she came out as a Muslim because people were talking to her like that, and people were addressing her, "You're a Muslim, why don't you go back from where you come from?" Another example, I really like that quote kind of. Hilal Sezgin, she's a journalist, and she speaks out a lot these days as a Muslim. Many non-Muslims don't understand that it is awkward to take a position. They just don't understand. I personally do not think that as a Muslim you have to explain to others that you are against terrorism. I think it is self-evident that every halfway good-hearted person is against terror. If anybody flies into a skyscraper in New York with an airplane, then I never gave my consent to this. This is why I do not have to renounce it. But she is every now and then asked for that. And you would hear that a lot in the German media as well as in the US media. Why don't people renounce violence? Why don't Muslims renounce terrorism? And she actually gives the answer, and she gives the answer that it's a real struggle for her. It's a pain to be conflated, to be put in the same pocket with people who do violent acts. And that is why she has to speak out. Another case, Navid Kermani, a writer, theater director, and a lot of other things, intellectual of Iranian descent, says it's a political decision to act in the name of this collective. The ascription, Islam is this and you are that because you are Muslim. Not to ignore that, but shift the meaning, to participate in defining what it means to be a Muslim. So even that is a reason to speak out as a Muslim, to kind of contribute to the mosaic of the different pictures, the different images that are out there. I'm coming to an end. I have to come to an end. I'm just getting started, actually. Get the feeling. Okay, Lala Akgün. She, when I talked to her in 2007, she was a member of parliament. And she said, when I asked her, "Are you a secular Muslim, or what people refer to you as that? So what are you?" "Yes, of course, I was socialized in this culture. I would call myself a secular Muslim or a cultural Muslim. But I will tell you one thing. Maybe I wouldn't call myself anything if there's a misspelling, if there were no such debates. However, in the midst of this amount of injustice, I have to take a position. And I will not tolerate that a bucket of dirt is dumped over all people of Muslim faith. In view of that, I feel how my solidarity is growing more and more. And I wanted to talk also about another issue, that's how Islamic organizations and mosques are getting together. But as I said in the beginning, that's another talk, or that's something that a lot of people do. But maybe your questions will lead us to that. And so I just thank you for your attention.